Hi, I'm Harrison from On the Mic Training, and thank you for clicking on this video. I'm just going to talk a little bit about what it means to be a voiceover artist in this video, and a little bit about how one does that. How do you get into the industry from a newcomer who doesn't really know a lot about how everything works to someone who is fairly established but looking to take their career to the next level. One thing I want to address right off the bat is just some of the terminology around a career in voiceover. I found that, with a lot of people who want to get into voiceover, the term voice actor is used a lot, and voice acting is often only really associated with the more character side of the industry, things like animation, things like dubbing, things like video game. But it really can be used as a term across the entire industry, although some people would call someone who does voiceover for all areas of voiceover just a voiceover professional, or a voiceover artist, someone who is able to take on commercials, corporate work, audiobook narration, animation, video games commercials, all the above. Anything you can think of, you have the talent and the ability to take on those areas of the industry. So number one, probably the most in-demand area that everyone wants to get into, animation. Animation for cartoons, for feature films. These are recorded in slightly different ways in different cities. I can say that here in Vancouver, a lot of what we do is prelay and ensemble prelay. So, we get all the actors in a room, we run through the script, usually twice. We record all the lines, we get all the actors doing their lines. Everyone's been cast already. It's a ton of fun. It's an area that has big demand. It's quite competitive. It's probably one of the most high skill areas you can get into. I'd say in terms of the levels of voiceover, it's definitely near the top. It's what you want to aspire to get into. It's what you want to work towards. And it's very rewarding when you do, both creatively and, of course, as part of your career. Video games can be a really good way to ease in to voiceover in terms of doing characters. I've always found that the auditions that are going out, especially for newer people on a lot of rosters, are video games a lot of the time. Because there's a lot of side characters in video games. There's a lot of smaller roles, a lot of ways you can ease yourself into the career. There's, of course, union and non-union video game work. The pay scale is different depending on where you work. But I think one thing that's great about video game voiceover, especially if you're new, it's a great way to build connections, a great way to meet people, build trust, learn a little bit more about the creative demands of the industry. Video games are very different to animation recording in terms of what you do when you're actually in the room and what's expected of you for your energy. The types of directing prompts you get are quite different. So video games, there's a lot of people who that's their dream. Their dream is to do video game voiceover. And it can be a really good way to get in. But I think it's really important that I think video games, for the most part, in most cities, is a part of your portfolio of skills, not necessarily the only thing that you do. Dubbing and ADR for anime, for films, for TV shows. Anytime you're taking something that's already been made and putting it into another language, it's quite a creative challenge because what's on the screen has already been done. In many cases, a lot of your choices are already made, so you have to fit your performance into what's on the screen. And that's a very highly technical skill. And you meet some people who have been doing dubbing and ADR for a long time. They're amazing at it because they've had those reps. They've just done it so many times that they can get through those lines very quickly and efficiently. And they're very good because once you get comfortable with the idea of matching the mouth flaps and matching timing, then you can bring out your acting performance. And I think that's what a lot of people would say is their favorite thing about anime and that style of animation is how people are able to bring out those characters, despite the fact that in many cases it's a dub and you're somewhat constrained by what's on screen. Dubbing, of course, is huge right now. It's an area where a lot of people want to get into. It's very, very desirable work, especially for people who grew up with anime. It's a more recent phenomenon, but it is a little bit more regionally bound. There are really some regions that do a lot of it and others that don't really do a lot of it except for more kind of smaller online castings. And so if your goal is just to do dubbing, then great, because there's a lot of projects you can be doing online. if your goal is to doing it as your career, it can take a while to build. And in some cases, it's important to recognize that you might have to move in order to do dubbing at a very high level, and make that your main thing. Commercials. So I'll be honest, I think commercials are my favorite part of voiceover. I love the challenge of the big picture of trying to match your read, your energy into a campaign, into a brand, trying to figure out how to be as persuasive as possible, how to, see the course, the description of what they're looking for, and then give your take on it. And of course, commercials can be quite lucrative. There's every level of commercial you can think of. There's smaller commercials that are for radio, for web, for social media. And then there's the really high-end stuff that's going to air all across the country, potentially all across the world, some big campaigns. And ultimately, I think it's kind of a gold standard type thing. It's something that's quite highly competitive. You want to get into it. And you'll find it's just as challenging acting-wise in a lot of ways as playing characters. You really do have to bring a lot of yourself onto the microphone, and it's a lot of fun. I think commercial voiceover in many ways is not what people think it is. It's quite creatively challenging and requires you to really give your energy into the read. And so it's a lot of fun. Narration. So narration is a massive umbrella. When people say narration, I think the first thing that comes to mind for a lot of people is documentaries or lifestyle shows or stuff like that. It shows where there's a narrator telling the story of the show. A docuseries, something like that. But narration really also applies to areas of things like corporate narration. Explainer videos, technical videos. In many cases, it's kind of an umbrella term for things like e-learning as well, or online tutorials. So it really is a big umbrella that covers a lot of different areas. And one thing about narration is it's a very good way to get started, because you'll find a lot of the work that is out there online for people getting into the voiceover industry is narration a lot of the time. And so that can be your bread and butter while you build your skill, you build your repertoire. In my opinion, if you are trying to make your way in a career in voiceover, even if your goal is to do characters for things like animation, video games, dubbing, narration is a great way to start to build your portfolio, build skills, build some credits up so you actually have some experience to then try and pitch agents and pitch some bigger production studios. It definitely can be something that can be quite lucrative if you can get that volume up. Final area I wanted to talk about is audiobook narration. So audiobook narration is a very different area of voiceover, mainly because it's so long form and it requires such a wide variety of skills. You've got to be a good actor. You have to have good stamina. You have to have a solid voice. You've got to have good reading clarity. You have to understand context. There's a lot going on in audiobooks, but it's really its own thing. Our audiobook narration instructors are often saying that it's almost not voiceover because it's so long form and so different. But at the same time, audiobook narration can be a really good way to build roads for yourself. It can be a great way to get your opening credits in the industry. And I know a lot of people who have gotten their introduction to their agent and through different production people because they were willing to be open-minded to do audiobook narration and embrace that challenge of what it is. So, there's going to be some people who have audiobook narration as their number one thing. That's their dream, and that's why they want to get into voiceover. And there are going to be other people who are a little bit more nervous by it, that how much work it is to do an audiobook. But I think it can be a really good creative challenge and a great way to meet people and build confidence about doing those more long-form reads. Ultimately, as a school, we offer courses in all of these areas. So, we have courses that specifically go into characters, commercials, narration, audiobooks, dubbing, video games, and all the other necessary skills that are required to be a great voiceover performer. Hey, thanks for watching. If you're looking for more great content about voiceover and the voiceover industry, hit the subscribe button and you'll be alerted about all future videos.